and my story behind it. So I'm originally from Minnesota and Wisconsin, and I moved to North Carolina in 2013 to attend North Carolina State University College of Design for my master's in architecture. So I graduated from that program in 2016, and I moved to Durham, North Carolina, which is very nearby. And I began working at a local architecture firm called Dudapane Architects. I know that Alan, you probably are familiar with this firm. I'm not sure if anyone else is, but really reputable local architecture firm where I was, just kind of living the life that I always imagined myself to be living when I was dreaming about becoming an architect, and then in grad school, where I was doing all the different roles from schematic design to construction administration. And I was working in the office and I was building these cool architectural models, and I was creating cool architectural renderings. I also bought a house, which was within biking distance to the office that I worked at. And I decided that I was going to renovate this house while I was working full time, which I honestly would not recommend to anyone. It was not actually a good choice in terms of stress and health. But yeah, just generally had a thriving social life. I was working on completing my architecture registration exams at the time. And just generally, I was 28 years old, had everything going for me, was on track with my life. And suddenly one day I was unexpectedly hit head on by a car coming the opposite way on the road. And it was, as I mentioned, completely unexpected. The next slide has an image of the vehicle. So if you're sensitive to photos of car wrecks, like I sort of am, I just want to give you a heads up about that. But this was my vehicle. Like I mentioned, this car just swerved over. They were taking a left-hand turn. They didn't yield like they were supposed to. It was 100% on them. And I slammed my head into the steering wheel and I suffered a massive traumatic brain injury. So on the right here is a scan of my brain. And you can see the light gray here in the image is actually the blood that was pooling up in my brain. I was rushed to the emergency room and my life completely changed in that night. I spent the night in the ER. They decided not to operate to drain the blood, although they probably should have. It was probably a liability calculation more than what would have helped me. But yeah, it was like all of a sudden all of my plans for my life and myself were completely changed in that moment. And all of a sudden I am dealing with disability. And I am all of a sudden a disabled person. And very, very, like I mentioned, unexpected. And I didn't really know how to navigate moving forward because I went from having all of these capabilities and my entire life laid out before me and my entire life plan figured out to having a tremendous amount of uncertainty around what was next for me and what was next for my life because I was suffering from severe chronic migraines, balance issues. I was having issues with lack of sensation on the right side of my body. And then most critically to my career in architecture, I was struggling to spend time on the computer because anytime I would be on the computer or read anything for more than 15 minutes at a time, I would get hot and nauseous and my vision would start to blur. And it was just like not even a possibility for me to continue doing that task. And so, I think after the car crash, I thought, okay, I'll be back in the office in 2 weeks. I'm an eternal optimist. So I was like, all right, I'll be back. No time. But, I found myself a year later and I was still struggling in this haze and just like not certain what was before me. And so instead of continuing to try to go back to architecture, which, I realized in this moment, there's no going back from this. It's only moving forward, and I need to focus my energy on finding a route forward now. So what is that route? And it really took me sitting in that grief of the loss of my life, my capabilities, like my youth, like all of these things that I felt like I was losing in that moment. And I really sitting in that grief to really turn to say, okay, what's next? And what came to my mind was I'm still a creative person. Yeah, I have disability now, but I'm still creative. I can create. So why don't I just start doing that? And I believe that it was my aunt who in that moment, just encouraged me to have a renaissance moment that, she just said, you need to really show up for yourself and remake yourself and find a way out of this. And I did that through creativity. And so the first thing that I did was I started sketching. And these are some of the early sketches I made, just really basic, two-dimensional drawing, well, three-dimensional depictions of these spaces and just, just playing with form and line. And I thought this is excellent, but I'm not sure this is 100% like my like total calling. Like I feel like I have more in me than doing two-dimensional work here. And so I had an idea for a concept for a three-dimensional model. And I should also mention that while this is happening after the car crash, it was a maybe maybe a year. Sorry, I'm getting so much beeping from people coming into the waiting room. I'm getting a little bit distracted, but so basically it was maybe a year after my car accident that the pandemic hit. And so COVID is now in full swing or in complete lockdown. And this is the moment where I'm like, okay, everyone is locked down and I need to, if I don't do something now, I'm gonna like I was already very isolated, I'm gonna get even more isolated. And so I need to really show up for myself in this moment and really find some creative outlets to make my life, give my life some meaning and some forward momentum right now when I need it most. So these were the two-dimensional drawings. And then, like I mentioned, I had an idea for a three-dimensional model. And this was the sketch that I made. It's really, really simple. It's just like, what if I did some diamonds? Really, really simple with off-centered apex. What would that be like when I made it? And so I went down to the basement of my home and I did what I could do. I spent 10 to 15 minutes on the computer and I created these modules that I created this in three-dimensional form first, and then I flattened it out into two-dimensional form using this design on the bottom here, and then I cut it with an X-Acto blade and assembled it. And I did this using the pattern, as I mentioned on the bottom here, where the dashed lines are the fold lines and the red lines are the glue lines. So really this whole thing kind of like folded up and then I glued all the seams. Now, as you can imagine, that took a long time to do all of that gluing. And so I thought, well, next time I'm going to do it like this, where I'm putting the dash lines on these folds, and then I'm going to glue along one seam to make the same design. So really kind of figuring that out in that moment. But the result was still awesome. So I actually hit it with a directional light and got this really cool light play that happened. And then I went ahead and I posted it on my Instagram. And I got such a wonderful response from my community of people, I think, who were just waiting to see what, like, if I was going to recover from this car accident, what I was going to do next. And I just got such enthusiastic response from my people. And they just said, we just want more, like, keep going, keep doing this. And so I did. And so I just kept making. So these are what I call my early study model series. I still have them in my studio. I'm in my studio right now. It's the same studio that I started making these designs in 2020. And I have these original paper artworks on the wall behind me still. And as I mentioned, this is just created using within the constraints of my life at this point, which is that I have 10 to 15 minutes on the computer where I'm allowed by my brain injury to do that amount of work. And so what am I going to do with that? I'm going to go and make a module that then can be born into 3D life, printed and cut and made into a three-dimensional sculpture that then when I compile it, these modules can make these really interesting designs. So I had taken this constraint and gotten creative within it. And that's one of the mottos of my brand, Folded Poetry, is just that constraint breeds creativity. Because when we have more constraints on a circumstance, it can often lead us to more interesting and more innovative outcomes. So I continued to make these designs. This was an early one that I made. This one is called Wild Geese, after the poem by Mary Oliver, which is a favorite of mine, which talks about creativity and just choosing creativity and hearing the call of creativity. And at this point, when I made this design, sometimes we set out to do things and we don't fully understand what our goal is with that action until we're in it and or we have the outcome of it. And at this point, what I realized I'm doing with my artwork is I'm creating these designs which are to evoke what I've experienced with my brain injury. So one of the primary symptoms, as I mentioned, that I was dealing with was visual disturbances. And I still deal with this a little bit to this day, which is that when I look at people who are wearing checkered shirts or striped shirts, or I look at a brick wall, or even a tile floor with like a dark grout and a light tile, or vice versa, the pattern appears to move or swim, like it's like an optical illusion on its own. And it's literally my brain like hallucinating when I'm seeing that pattern. It's like there's a processing disorder that's there. And so I think at this point, I made this intense, complex piece and I thought, wow, I really am like, I didn't even know that's what I was doing, but this is what I'm after now, is I'm capturing my brain injury through the aesthetic of my artwork. So I created this piece, and I created these other early pieces, which the one on the left is actually created out of three different L shapes. These different L shapes are at different heights. But if you squint your eyes a little bit when you're looking at this, you can see it's a bit of a different field that emerges. So we have kind of this darker field and a lighter field that emerges. So really, really plays into kind of this optical illusion effect. And then these other two pieces. Now you'll notice that, these are all in black and white. And at this point, I'm very responsive to my architecture upbringing, which is in my master's program, was very much where I was taught to use black and white to discover, to do the main design moves and to discover the design, and then use color very strategically. And so early on, I was only working in black and white until I had this commission. Now, and I also didn't mention this yet too, but as I'm posting these on the internet, I'm getting people who are reaching out for commissions. And I'm like, okay, I guess this is like a little side hustle that I'm doing to build some momentum for my life. And at this point, I was still on a disability policy through my former employer, who was the architecture firm. And this client wanted a piece with color. And so this was my first piece where I'm using color. Again, I'm using these individual modules that I'm creating. And another thing I can do is also reflect them to create a new module out of the same one as like a quick edit on the computer. Now, this color is placed here on the right to represent where the shadow would be received if there was a direct light place coming from this direction in the piece. So all of these spaces are representing where the shadow would be or would live on this piece if that light was in that position. And then these are a bunch of other early designs that I created. These were all commissioned pieces. This was actually my first commission that I sold to a friend and neighbor. I believe that I only sold this piece for like $125 or something like that. And then I started getting, like I mentioned, these other commissions. I just want to pause for a second and ask if anyone has any questions. I'm going to be talking about, like I said, my design thinking and my story, but I would like this to be interactive. So if you do have a question, I just want to encourage you to just speak up and ask it as I'm presenting so that I can address it in the moment. So does anyone have any questions at this point?
Just press your space bar if you want to speak so you can be heard.
And if you don't want to be heard, just put it in the chat box and we can even read it out loud. If not, we'll continue on.
Okay, great. Here are some more early pieces of artwork. And again, what I'm doing mostly at this time is I'm creating these pieces and I'm submitting them to like local art shows, or I'm selling them directly to clients. But most of these, like especially all of the ones that are on this page, well, actually all of these are really like design explorations where I'm just looking at how I can work with paper, color, form, line, shadow to make some really unique and interesting designs using just this really accessible and very forgiving medium that is paper. I like this piece on the right because it's one continuous set of lines that goes all the way through the artwork. These are two pieces which flank a hallway in the client's home. And what the client asked me to do was to create a piece that had blue and gold accents, blue to represent their living room and gold to represent their bedroom. So in this direction, we're heading toward out of the bedroom. And so you can only see gold on these pieces. Whereas in the opposite direction, the living room is on the side where we are located at now, which is kind of down the hallway this way. So super interesting design challenge for this because I could have gone in a number of directions. I could have worked with the shape, I could have worked with the depth, could have worked with the density and or the color, but it was like really an exercise in constraint where I said, okay, I'm just going to work with the color and the density to create this expression and strategically place those and leave those other factors out of the equation to make sure that the design reads really clearly. So these are all paper artworks I've discussed up until this point, but I started getting these requests for custom commissions for mostly residential homes as well. So this is a piece in a modern home in Durham created by a local architecture firm where the client wanted something in their light-filled stairwell, and they really were attracted to this iridescent acrylic option for material. So this is created using these diamond shapes that interlock. And I created the diamond shapes using this design, which is two different pieces that interlock together to create the design. So just really interesting concept. This is the first design where I was studying this idea of creating these sort of modular interlocking parts for a screen design. And this concept will come up as well later in the presentation. Then using this iridescent acrylic as well for this installation was a big move for me. This piece came at a really interesting time. You know, I hit this point in my career where it was like, I'm starting to get more and more commissions. My disability company has dropped me from their policy. They don't want to cover me anymore. They don't think I'm actually disabled. Well, if anyone knows anyone or has it personally experienced disability, we know that it's not like you're disabled or you're not disabled. Like it's like anything, there's a spectrum in there. And so I'm healing, but I'm not to the point where I can hold like a 9-to-5 job at this point. But of course, you know, they were very, very vigilant in making sure that I was dropped from their policy because they perceived me as a candidate who could potentially qualify for lifelong benefits. And they said, well, we don't even want to get into that. Unfortunately, I've been able to heal a lot since then, but at the time, this was very uncertain for me. And so I got to this point in my career where I was like, well, do I try to go back to doing architecture part-time and just sort of like live in pain and like deal with the headache that comes along with working on my computer for as many hours a day as I can? Or do I just keep going with my art and just see if I can make it on my artwork? And right as I was making that decision, I found, or this commission just came to me, literally dropped in my lap from an Instagram post that an architect had seen and recommended me for the job. I had never even met the architect before, but he knew my story through an Instagram feature on an artist architect's Instagram page. And he recommended me for this piece. So this is an iridescent acrylic suspended ceiling installation. It lives in a nonprofit arts education facility in Carborough, North Carolina. It's called Luminary, and these are individual lumens which are engraved with people's names who donate to the facility. So I sold this piece as a price per unit for the ceiling installation, and then the facility resells these individual lumens that people buy in order to donate to the facility. So they make a profit, I make a profit. It ended up being a really, really great project, but the design was really interesting. So it's to create something really unique in terms of the design pattern, but then also creating a connection where these individual tiles can be removed and etched in with people's names over time. So I had to think a lot about like the connection, more like the engineering side of this as well. And then additionally, interesting whole other design challenge was connecting it to the ceiling, which ended up being a completely different material than I expected when I arrived on site. So always unique and interesting design challenges coming my way in this field. So here's another image of that installation. Super wonderful installation. They love it. I love it. I'm very happy with the way this turned out. And I often see it in their Instagram because they'll do photos of people, you know, standing in the gallery at an art show. And it's like, oh, there's my piece on the ceiling right there. Here's another installation that I got early on. That was another big transformative piece. This was for a mixed-use luxury apartment complex in Colorado Springs, and the client was Graystar, and they came to me. This project came to me through Art Lifting, which is a arts commissioning and liaison company who represents exclusively artists who've been impacted by homelessness or disability. Now, they got in contact with me right around this time I was making this kind of difficult decision whether I wanted to go full send with my art or not. And this project was my first project that I landed with them. And this was a project that had a $75,000 budget. So like really big ticket for me at the time, and still a really big ticket project that really was really helpful in helping me really define and really like stand in my power as like a sculptural artist and really call myself that and own that identity. So this project is called The Journey. The prompt from the client was literally, we want you to create a piece that's inspired by a journey to Pikes Peak. That was it. That was the only information I got on this. We want two pieces, one in the lobby space, one in the clubhouse space, and they have to be inspired by a journey to Pikes Peak. So I created this design proposal that talked about this idea that when we go on a journey, when we go on a vacation, when we want to leave town and get out, we usually do it because we're stressed out. We have all this stress, we have all this chaos in our lives. And then, of course, when we're preparing to leave for the journey, it's always more stress and chaos. But then as soon as we get to the other side, we have this order, we have this release, we have this flow. We move from stress to flow, compression to release, chaos to order. And so I wanted to represent that using line work and create a sculptural piece from that. So I decided to be inspired to use this inspiration of tree bark as the compression and the chaos, and use this flowing landscape of Pikes Peak, more of a little representation of it for the release, order, and flow side of the piece. And this is how that turned out. So this is created using medium density fiberboard and paint, and had this really unique corner condition, which was incredibly challenging to design and detail, but I think turned out really, really well. So here are the two sides of that, the bark side and the mountain side. And then the details of the corner, as well as this side of the bark, which I think this is probably my favorite shot of the entire piece, which I snapped right after we had finished installing it, which I was there for in Colorado Springs. So super interesting project. And then for the clubhouse space, which was the second project for this kind of dual commission project for this luxury unit called the Fiona. I took these individual tiles, which were just snapshots or moments, with this concept of like when we go on vacation or when we go on and have a journey, we have these snapshot memories, or we have these snapshot photos, and just these moments that we collect of the vacation or of the trip or of the journey. And then I combined them to create this sculpture wall that combines all of these tiles in various orientations to create this unique sculptural piece. I wish I had some better photography of this, but I love this idea of creating these sculptural tiles to create, just customizable arrangements for a variety of applications. So here's another image of that in the clubhouse. Like I mentioned, this was the only photography I got back on this project. So really not the best photography, but I work with what I got. So that's what I got for now. And then this is another piece, this more recent piece that I finished this year, this summer. This is for JRM. That's the client, JRM Construction Management. This is for their corporate headquarters in New York City in Manhattan. And this design was created by myself. You might recognize it as my original diamond design, which has become sort of like my prototyping standard. And it's created out of this gold acrylic material. This design, this piece and fabrication for this artwork was done by Scott Goodwin, who is at Obsidian Solution, who is the fabricator for the sculptural product that we're all here to discuss, which I'm getting to in just a few moments in my presentation. But he did he's been partnering with me to create artwork. And this is a piece that we partnered together to create for art lifting for this JRM client. And we're all very, very happy with the way this turned out. I just spoke with Art Lifting about this piece earlier today, and they said the client is just delighted with it, and then it's sort of become a symbol for their corporate office in New York City, and that they just absolutely love it. So I was delighted to hear that. Okay, now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my exploration into acoustic art. Before I do that, does anyone have any questions at this point? And if not, I'll just keep on going. Okay, great. Thanks again for your time and attention. So as I was exploring these sculptural paper artworks, I kept thinking about my time working in the field of architecture as an architectural designer. And I kept thinking about how I remember when I was working on these really big projects, like these corporate office towers or these student unions, that we just didn't have like a ton of really great options for super unique, sculptural, interesting, acoustic products. Like it kind of felt like we had to decide between something that functioned really well and something that looked really good. And so it just kind of stuck in my mind, and I thought there's a market gap here that needs to be filled. And of course, at the time, I had no idea that I would be the one striving to fill it. But I did remember that. And when I was recovering from my brain injury, I was dealing with a lot of auditory overwhelm, just feeling completely like I cannot even be downtown in these brick and wood buildings because it is just too dang loud and I will just be completely overwhelmed. And so I encountered this accessibility barrier that I still struggle with to this day, which is like sometimes spaces are just too loud for me. And it's like I get really distracted. I can't focus on what people are saying. And so really brought this into my practice and thought, well, these designs that I'm creating, they have all these directionally scattered surfaces. They would function really, really well if I paired them with an acoustic product or an acoustic material or some sort of soft surface. So I started prototyping this right in my studio in the basement here. This was one of my earliest pieces where I just said, what if I just covered this Celtic design with this pink flocking material? Like, what would that be like? And I thought, that's pretty good. It's mounted to a backer board. Let's try to make it bigger. So I created these cardboard shapes, and I also, just the same way, covered them with this velvet flocking material, and I mounted it to a backer board and created this unique design which I call interruption. And this one sold to a local friend and client. And I thought, I like this, but I don't love that these are all mounted to a backer board. Like, I want to create these individual shapes that can be mounted individually to the wall. So what does that feel like? So here's an early iteration that I made in SketchUp, which is the program I create all my designs in. And I was thinking, this is what I'm going for, which is like this idea of having these individual modules that create a composite sculptural artwork. So I started prototyping that, and I created this cardboard template that then I covered with this velvet flocking material and started folding it up and putting it together. And I thought, well, this works pretty well. I mean, this is all right, but I didn't love the craft of it. Like, I just felt like I didn't have the process quite down, because I felt like while it looks really cool, and I do love this design because it's 4 different modules. This is only 2 different modules. It's a square with a big square within the square, and it's a square with a small square within the square. And these are rotated in 4 different directions to create this really like mind-bending piece. But what I didn't like about this is that it has this seam here. And what was happening with material is that as soon as I was starting to bend this material to put it together, it's like it wanted to pull itself apart under the tension of the material itself. The tensile stress of this material made it so that this was just not sustainable and that it would just pull itself apart. So I was like, all right, well, I need to rethink this. So I'm thinking about this right now as if I'm doing something like this, where I'm cladding this material and then I am putting it together and adhering the seam. So what if I did it like this direction, like I originally did that first original diamond scheme? And think about this more like a Chinese takeout box, where what if I put this together and then I clad it with something while it's fully enclosed? So what would that be like? So I started exploring this concept using cardboard. So here is a first design that I started out exploring, which is putting this together. And look at these notched together perfectly. It holds its form really well. The problem here was that we had these seams here that I didn't like. I was like, I don't know, I can't stretch fabric over this and it still look nice. It would have this sort of weird edge to it. But what I found is that when I flip this over and I crushed the seams with this cardboard material and I notched it together on the backside, it created this really, really seamless design, which I absolutely loved and was like, okay, we're in business now. So I took that design and I started cladding it with this fabric material. And then I created multiples of them. So this is me doing that process where I'm creating the fully enclosed diamond shape, and then I am adding adhesive and then stretching this fabric over it. I did this at a makerspace prototyping lab here in the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina, probably 10, 15 minutes away from my house. And like I mentioned, this is still during deep COVID. You can see I'm wearing a mask. This was during a time where there wasn't a lot going on, so I had plenty of motivation to, and I still, obviously still do, but plenty of motivation then, still on this kick to reinvent what I'm doing with myself, and really that space was really wonderful for it. They had these wonderful boards. We could talk through the cutting and the design of the fabric and everything, and then when I put it together on the wall for the client, this was the installation. So at this point, I'm like, I love this. They loved it. I was like, this is wonderful, but I'm not entirely sure if this is a sustainable practice. Like, what if there's like a durability aspect? But you can see, I mean, it did turn out beautifully. Like, I love the way that this fabric, this is a polyester fabric that stretches over, creates this wonderful velvety look. This client is, super happy with the design of this, and I am too. And really like this project, along with the next two that I'm going to show you, are really what led to me landing this licensing deal with Unicavev and actually ending up partnering with them, because I had done this legwork to explore and really show what my artwork can be at a large scale using different materials. And obviously, does this look familiar? Back to the original diamond concept, which I use for prototyping everything, it seems. The next stab I took at this was using a plastic material and cladding it with this foam on top. So using a foam veneer over this HDPE plastic material. And so the way that I'm doing this is cutting it flat on a CNC router and then screwing in the flanges to make this fully enclosed shape that then looks like this. And here is the next slide is the full installations for how this looks on the wall. So also very interesting, more durable, but I still wasn't convinced. And I thought, if I could just get my hands on some like actual acoustic material to prototype with, like that would be awesome. But I had no idea how to get in touch with that material. But one day, my friend who worked with me at the architecture firm that I used to work full time at before the car crash interrupted that, reached out to me and said, hey, I have a furniture maker that I'm working with for a client in Raleigh, and they have a bunch of this acoustic felt material that they are literally putting in the dumpster because of an insurance claim issue. Do you want some? They will give it to you. And I went over and said, heck yeah, I want this. And I went and got a bunch of it. And but I had it all. The constraint here, the constraint here is that I had it only in these panels with this of this size with these holes already in it. And I had no idea how to cut this thing. So I had to figure out how to cut it. And working with a local fabricator found that I can cut it on a CNC router with a really small blade and a specific type of blade. And so I started prototyping designs for this. And here on the left is this design. This is a bubble. This is what I call my bubble design. This was my original design for this material. It ended up not working because this material was like the flanges and the tight areas were just like too tight, and the router would actually burn the material. So it ended up not working for this particular design, but I wanted to show you this because this is exactly how I had to work, which is like literally create a design that went around all of this hole pattern and would also be integrated into the hole pattern to make a really unique pattern, a really unique design for this piece. So I took another stab at it and I came up with this design, which is a bit more simple, and then it ended up working. So here is me assembling this screen design together and creating these two pieces that fit together both laterally side to side and then also on top of each other. And then this is how this acoustic screen concept came to be. And I put this in a local art show, and I absolutely love it still. I love that the holes are integrated with this as well. Here's some more shots of this design. And at this point, I had gone to a local networking event for construction tangential people, and I had met a bunch of folks there, and maybe that was probably 6 months prior. Then I started prototyping with these different designs, both the diamonds, the red hexagons, and then this screen design, and I put it in my email newsletter. At this networking event, I had a bunch of people that I had solicited to sign up for my newsletter, and they started following me through my newsletter on Instagram, etc. And they liked my newsletter. One person was following me really closely, and she found, she discovered that when I posted this in my newsletter, I was talking about how I'm very interested in acoustic design, and do you know of anyone who'd be interested in licensing this design? And she, her name is Danielle Milesky, and she's at Warco Construction. And she, I just have to shout out to her because it's like the connection, because she sent that email to Alan Morgenstern, and then Alan sent that email to Wick. And I met with Alan. Alan drove from Charlotte to Raleigh about 2.5 hours to meet with me, and I showed him this design, I showed him some of my other designs, and then it was like off to the races. Now I'm meeting with Wick, I'm meeting with Scott, and I'm getting this licensing deal going. So that's it's such an interesting connection, and it all happened through like this prototyping effort, obviously, but then also like just me sharing boldly and openly like my work with people who are on my email newsletter and then just making this connection through that. So super interesting. And then that leads me, of course, to this product line, which is the development of our collaboration and all of this, everything that's come up until this point in my career is sort of like informing this product line, which is both acoustic artwork, which is both aesthetically inspired by my brain injury, functionally inspired by my brain injury. The whole thing has just been such a wonderful symbol of everything that I've been through and everything that I've described to you. So as you know, there's these 3 different shapes in the product line. They are available in both centered and off-centered and both printed and solid color core options. And they can be tiled together to create, I'm sure you've seen the renderings already if you're on this call, but they can be tiled together, create some really amazing designs. And I just want to harken back to these early images of my early study models. So really, it goes back to like the very first study models. Like these are like my original concepts that then are being made into these wonderful products that then can create these super unique designs. So this is a rendering created by a rendering agent that we were working with to create the images, and just shows the wonderful variety of things that you can do with these designs. And recently, I was about 2.5 weeks ago, was it 2.5 weeks ago? I was in, gosh, was that 2.5 weeks? Anyway, I was in New York City for the Boutique Design New York trade show, and it's not letting me go. There we go. I was in the Boutique Design New York trade show. Major shout out to Wick and Unica Dev for helping me attend this wonderful trade show. I was there with Miles and Courtney. Hey, you guys, I already said hi to you. Was so grateful to have you there with me. And I just want to tell you a little bit about how it went because it was just fabulous. People were so interested in the product. Like people were walking by. At one point we had like swarms of people who were like around this product, like, wow, what is this? We love it. The majority of the people that we spoke to at the show were interior designers. And what they were really attracted to about this product is the fact that it's both art and acoustics. And what they were saying is that normally when we have a building budget, we have both an art budget and an acoustics budget. But this product is a wonderful crossover for both of those budgets. So whether you may not be able to do something super unique in the acoustics or the art budget alone, if you combine those, this product literally fills both of those functions. In terms of the materiality for this product, we have the PET felt material. This felt is made from recycled plastic bottles. It is cradle to cradle certified, and it helps clients meet their sustainability goals. So a lot of these projects for these clients, like at least when I was working in architecture, we all were striving for like a LEED certification. So that came down to what were the products that we specified in our building. And this material is wonderful for meeting sustainability goals for the clients. We also talked about the performance, about how the NRC rating is likely going to be extremely high. It's still forthcoming for this product, but I will say that, products that have an air gap function very, very well. And these are 2 different pieces of material that are adjoined, and there is an air gap, and each one of these pieces is hollow. So not only is it refracting the sound through the directionally scattered surfaces, it's also absorbing the sound through the material, and then also the material has the noise waves that actually penetrate through the material and get trapped on the inside in the noise, basically black hole cavity on the inside. And then another thing that was really interesting regarding the function is this concept of the facets that are on this design. So I just want to go back to this image where you can really see that these have multiple facets. So the way that we designed it is it has these beveled edges, and this also like just adds even more surface, even more dimensionality in terms of design, but it also adds more like of that scattered surface area that really performs really well. And then also in terms of the production of this product, this is a wonderful opportunity for that Scott in Texas, who leads the production of this, has created for job opportunities for people trying to transition in their lives. So he has worked with a transitioning organization that creates opportunities for people who are transitioning out of like adverse life experiences, homelessness, dealing with drug addiction, dealing with, dealing with, you know, reemerging into society from being incarcerated. There are so many different types of stories of people that he shared with me who work in this facility who actually assemble this work, that this product, it has so many different wonderful symbols and meanings to it. It's not just about my story. You have the aesthetic side of it. You know, you have the functionality side, my story. You have that it performs super, super well. You have that, you know, it checks a lot of boxes for the interior designers, but then it also empowers and uplifts people in the actual physical production of the product itself. So another thing that I would like to mention is that if you would like custom arrangements with your clients, you can work with me, that your clients can work with me directly to produce custom arrangements for your space. So these are all the renderings were custom designs that I created for the specific effort for marketing, but I have a whole bunch of more ideas, limitless ideas. And that's what I love about this, is that it's really like this opportunity for people to play with shapes. Like we all love, like, we're all like kids inside, right? Like we all love to play with shapes. We all love to play in general. And this product really gives people an opportunity to play with shapes and create these unique arrangements. And it's just like totally limitless and endless is the number of arrangements that you can make with this product. And I really love that this product allows you to do that and just kind of yeah, just kind of have that wonderful creative experience. And that's also symbolic of so many other wonderful things. So that is literally all I have. Oh, actually, no, I have one more thing, which is that I also created these holiday ornaments this year. Every year I create holiday ornaments, and I believe that Unica Bev is providing them for you guys. I have an order through Unica Bev for these at least. And I'll let Wick tell you a little bit about what he's going to be doing with the ornaments specifically. But I'll also just say that if you do have an interest in providing these holiday ornaments to your clients for the season or to your family or whatever, I am selling them in batches and at a discount. So if you're interested in that, just let me know. They're architectural, they're sculptural, they're beautiful. I love them, and I've gotten way more orders than I expected already. So I'm very grateful for that. So that's all I have for you today. What I do want to encourage you to do as we discuss this, as we move on, transition out of my portion of the discussion is go ahead and follow me. Follow me on Instagram, connect with me on LinkedIn, and then if you would care to, this QR code, if you scan it with your phone, will lead me to my newsletter sign up. And I would love to keep in touch with you there because it's truly how I share more about my design thinking. So like a lot of what I talked about in this presentation is my design thinking behind projects. I love sharing that openly. I love discussing that in my email newsletter. So if you're at all interested in connecting there, I would love to have you. And I only email maybe once a month or so on average, a little bit more during the holiday season for my ornament sales. But really, it's just about keeping you in the loop about my new design offerings. And I would absolutely love to keep you in the loop. And I'm just looking at the chat right now to see if there are lots of positive, encouraging notes. And then I'm just curious, does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have anything they would like to add or any questions about what I've discussed or anything else that they would like to talk about?
Yeah, don't be shy, guys. This is your opportunity. You know, this is a great opportunity to speak with Eliza. And I know, Eliza, you've always been very open about your journey. It's been a delight getting to know Eliza and working with her. It's taken us about a year, I'd say a little bit more than a year to get to this point. And we're looking forward to doing more collections with Eliza. And I'm going to volunteer her, not on the fly, but I would think, Eliza, that if people have a major meeting with a designer or something and, you know, they want to meet you or something, that we could make you available for that. So the other thing I just wanted to say is that as regards the ornaments that we're going to be receiving soon, we'll be giving each of you an allocation of those, and we'd hope that you
so we'll be able to get some out to you. Okay. Questions?